Welcome, everyone. As you come into the room, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about what we'll be doing, and then we'll start so nobody will miss anything really important. So welcome to Bad Sydney Crime Writers Festival. This is our international and online version. Usually in September, we're meeting together in the centre of Sydney. Obviously not possible this year for reasons which are very clear to all of us. But the great advantage about meeting online is that we've been so far in the US, we've been in Norway, we've been in the UK, and now we're in Sweden. My name is Catherine Dupeloux-Menager, and I'm the artistic director of the festival. And I really want to thank our main partner for the festival, the City of Sydney. We really appreciate your continued support. Before we start, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of country. So wherever you are in Australia, wherever you're listening to us from today, we acknowledge their continuing connection to land, waters, and culture, and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Now, as I said, we're in Sweden tonight. We have the huge pleasure of talking to the Queen of Swedish crime, Camilla Läckberg. Well, you're familiar with her Fjällbacka series, but today she'll also be talking about her new book, The Gilded Cage, which is a standalone book with the best ending you will ever read. It's a huge pleasure to welcome you today, Camilla.
Thank you very much.
Interviewing Camilla.
There will actually be more of the books in the series with the Gilded Cage.
So more fantastic endings.
Yeah, one is already out, but not yet in Australia, and I'm going to start working on the third one.
Well, that's all the better for us. Thank you. Professor Sue Turnbull is going to be talking to you tonight. Sue is from the University of Wollongong, and she's an expert in crime fiction, and she really knows her Scandinois. I'll tell you very quickly how we'll be running the event. To the audience, your audio and your video are muted. You can't hear us. You can hear us, but we can't hear or see you. About 40 minutes in, Sue will invite you to start sending in your questions via the Q&A facility at the bottom of your screen. She'll ask as many as she possibly can. I'll come in briefly at the end to say thank you. So Sue, I'll hand over to you because we've got a lot to talk about.
We do indeed, Catherine. Thank you very much indeed for that introduction. And Camilla, hi.
Hi.
It's just almost breakfast time. You've got a cup of coffee?
Yes, it's 10 o'clock, so I've had a bit of breakfast and now I'm having my coffee here with you.
And we're just setting up for our evening, pre-evening drinks, hoping everybody's either got a drink or a cup of coffee while they sit by our virtual fireside and we have a chat. I'm going to start by talking about the Fjällbacka, and I don't know how my pronunciation is going, but I'm hoping
Perfect. Like a Swede.
Hoping so. The Fjällbacka series, of which there are 10 books, and they began in 2003. And I believe that the first one, the Isprinsessan, actually started in a creative writing class. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I was actually a business economist, and I was working full time as a business economist within marketing. But I always had this big dream of becoming a writer. So my then husband and my mother gave me a creative writing course as a Christmas gift, and that's how it all started.
And how hard was it to get that book published? Because you're right in about 2003, you're kind of on the cusp of what became the kind of Scandinois wave. So was it picked up with a view to selling overseas, or was it just for the Swedish market in the beginning?
Well, for me, it was kind of a funny and bit strange story, because this was right at the time when we had the first few big female crime writers in Sweden. Lisa Marklund, for example, she was the biggest one, but it wasn't quite common yet. It was mostly men writing about middle-aged police commissars listening to opera, drinking too much whiskey, and having trouble with women, and the females entered the stage and wanted to do something a tad different. And after I had finished my manuscript, I sent it to 3 publishing houses, a small a middle-sized one, and a large one. And 5 days after sending it, I got a call from the owner of the small one, who said that, "We've read your manuscript, we love it, we'd like to publish it." And that was quite a bit of a shock, because I was expecting, the first round of refusal letters, and then I would have to send to a few other publishing houses, etc., etc. So that was quite a shock, but it was a very, very small publishing house. So I think the first book sold in 3,000 copies, which was okay for a debutante. But then after the first book, I got in contact with the best literary agent in Sweden, Bengt Nordin. He's retired now, but he's a legend within the literary agency world in Sweden and internationally. And he believed in me, and he took me abroad, took the manuscript abroad, and also to the biggest publishing house in Sweden. And that's kind of how the saga started for me.
That's an amazing story. And I love the fact that you're saying that you were trying to do something different from the Henning Mankells of this world. I immediately thought of him when you were describing his detective, and that you were trying to do something slightly different, so that you set up from the beginning this marriage, this relationship between a writer and a policeman. And did you have any idea at the beginning that they were going to go for, 10 books?
No, my first goal was to have a book published. And once that was, accomplished, I changed my goal to, I want to be able to support myself as a writer. And I even put that in figures. How much do I have to earn every month to be able to say that I can support myself on my writing? And that was quite modest. So I was, my goal was very different from what actually happened, and things have gone way, way, way beyond my wildest dreams when I set out on this journey of becoming a writer.
It's a great kind of story, and we'll come back to your business acumen later, because it's very much present in this most recent book. You've returned to all that kind of knowledge and intelligence about the business world. But we were talking to Joe Nesbo, or Hugh Nesbo, the other night, and he was saying that with Harry Hooler, who of course it originally started in a book set in Sydney, The Bat, that over the course of the series, the focus shifted away. At the beginning, Harry was the eyes with which you saw the crime. But by the end, the focus has been, it's on Harry, it's Harry's story. Has there been any sort of evolution in your characters and your focus over the 10 books? Or do you think you've managed to maintain the same kind of balance between whatever the issue is and the marriage itself and the relationship?
I think that the relationship with Erica and Patrick have evolved very much the way I was hoping it would evolve. And the interesting thing, what you can do when you write a series, is that you can let them take turns. For some books, I never decide beforehand who's going to be like the main character in this book. Sometimes Patrick takes the lead, sometimes Erica takes the lead, sometimes it's a bit more equal. So over time, they get around 50-50 of the time, of the space in the books. But I can let that evolve organically. But the character that has surprised me the most over the books is Mellberg, because I'm Patrick's boss, essentially. When I created Mellberg, I created him as a comic relief character. I wanted to make him this obnoxiously lazy, quite horrible boss and man and human being. And through the books, I discovered that there was a very, very sweet heart somewhere there, deep, deep, deep inside of Mellberg. And I actually came to love him and saw some quite redeeming sides to his character. And that surprised me. I did not plan for that.
I love that when a character kind of takes on a life of their own in the writer's imagination. And, you hear writers say, they just did that, as if suddenly they went in that direction, and I don't know why.
I love when it happens.
It's a portrait of a marriage over the 10 years, but it's also a portrait of a place. And of course, I think one of the reasons why people all over the world like reading crime novels is because of setting. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about Fjällbacka as a setting for a crime novel, because it's not a big place, right? It's on the west coast, but it's apparently very picturesque. We should all be going there. Is there tourism connected to your books?
Yes, I mean, Fjällbacka is a place I was born and raised, and my mother still lives there, and it's very, very small. During 10 months out of the year, it's 1,000 people living there. So it's very, very small. But for the 2 summer months, or the Tuesday that we call summer in Sweden, it's a lot of people coming to Fjällbacka because it's absolutely beautiful. It's an old fishing village set by the ocean, and it's magnificent. And they do have guided tours now. So they have about 12, 13 guides trained in English, German, Spanish, etc. And I actually took the tour in October this year with 3 friends of mine and 2 ladies from Australia who were in Fjällbacka and in Sweden because they loved my books. And I took a chance that they wouldn't recognize me. So I went incognito during the whole tour, and I asked so many stupid questions about Camilla Läckberg. And then I had arranged with the tour guide that we would end the tour at my mom's apartment. And the 2 ladies from Australia, they were a bit worried. They were like, you know, do you always end the tour at her mother's? Isn't that an inconvenience for Camilla's mother? And they were like, no, she loves this, she loves this. So we went to my mom's apartment, and they didn't start looking suspicious until they saw tons of pictures of me, the lady standing next to them, all over the apartment. So then they figured it out.
Oh my God, I wish I'd been one of those Australian women on that tour. What a fantastic reveal.
That was fun.
They must have been absolutely astonished.
They were very happy. They were very happy.
Because Fjällbacka is actually closer to Oslo than it is to Stockholm, right?
Yes, it's 2 hours south of Oslo, so it's much closer to the Norwegian border than Stockholm.
Yeah, but you now live in Stockholm, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
And so you, right, and the Gilded Cage, which we're coming to now, the character Matilda, who becomes Faye, also goes from Fjällbacka to Stockholm. And I wondered to what extent her experiences of going from the small town to Stockholm reflected your own kind of encounter with Stockholm as a big city.
I've always put a lot of my own experiences into my books, and I do think it reflects a lot on how I felt coming to Stockholm. I started with Gothenburg, so I didn't go straight from Fjällbacka to Stockholm. That would have been too much of a shock for me, I think. But it does feel very much like a big, big, big city when you're a small town girl like me. And you know, we have a saying in Sweden that you can take the girl from the small town, but you can't take small town from the girl. So I still consider myself a small town girl, even though I live in Stockholm.
So what was the inspiration for this book? Why did you decide to break out from the series? Were you just anxious to get away from this marriage for a while, or was it that you had this story that you really wanted to tell?
It was 2 things, really. One was that I started feeling too much in my comfort zones with the Fjällbacka books. And as an author, if you want to evolve, you need to challenge yourself. You need to feel those butterflies in your stomach where you don't know, is this going to work? Will the audience like it? Will I like it? With Fjällbacka, I mean, I know I have millions of readers waiting, and that's amazing, but it's also too much of a comfort zone if you want to develop. And so I wanted to do something else. And for many years, I mean, even ever since I was a teenager, I had read and reread once a year, probably, Faye Weldon's Lives and Lusts of a She-Devil. And I love it. I think it's one of the most brilliant feminist books out there, and a brilliant story. But I started feeling the last 10 years that it was set in a different time that we're not in anymore. And I started thinking about how would a modern she-devil do it? And that's the first base of the idea for the books about Fae. But also, I missed a genre that was so popular that when I was a teenager in the 80s. It was a genre with books about cool, strong women taking over empires, eating men for breakfast, while wearing Chanel, looking fabulous. You know, books by Sidney Sheldon, for example, Judith Krantz. I mean, books like Thornbirds that we loved. And there was also this Australian miniseries that we loved in Sweden. And I actually got a DVD copy of it from a friend on my birthday. It's Swedish. It was about Back to Eden.
East of Eden.
East of Eden. And, you know, this over-the-top story about a millionaire wife who is, you know, pushed in the water with crocodiles from her young husband. And yeah, you know the story. And those stories kind of disappeared. Instead, we have lovely stories. I love those too, but there's a lot of stories now about the woman coming home early from work in London, finding her husband in bed with his either secretary or her sister. And she flees to a big country house she just inherited from her grandparents. And then she opens up a bookstore and she falls in love with the guy who has the dog walking business. I mean, it's not much girl power in that. So I wanted to create something really, really girl power. I'm right, aren't I? There are a lot of women opening bookstores falling in love with the guy with the dog walking business.
Yes, and I'm now thinking back to the 80s because I'm now thinking Dallas and Dynasty as those on-screen representations of powerful women. But then that's also interesting because, of course, Dallas, we had Sue Ellen, and there was a dreadful moment in Gilded Cage where I really thought Faye was going to be the Sue Ellen. In the, you know, she would just sit there chewing her lip forever. So
yeah.
I think this might be the moment where you can give us a little synopsis of the book, just for the people who haven't read it yet, just a little bit of an intro to what we're getting here.
Yes, the story is about Faye, who's married to Jack. They met at university, and she's actually the smarter one of the two, but she decided to, you know, just support him in his business. He becomes really successful, and she gradually gives up more and more and more of herself. And when we start following her in the book, I mean, she's basically given up on everything for Jack, for the love of a man. And when he betrays her, that's when the revenge of a woman scorned starts, and she takes no prisoners.
She never does. I mean, she's quite morally reprehensible. I mean, you said, you know, the she-devil. There's something that she does fairly early on in the book, and I'm wondering if that is going to be a comeuppance later. But that's I don't want to give anything away, so we won't go there at all. But she's definitely a morally reprehensible character in some ways. But those opening scenes, and I'm so glad you mentioned kind of Judith Krantz, because I do remember, I think it was the Australian critic Clive James writing about the Jacqueline Suzanne books and the things like that, and somebody described Judith Krantz as writing bonkathons. and your book's got quite a lot of bonking through it, but that first scene is wonderful, because when you've read the book through and then you go back and you read that first sex scene, you realize the politics of it and how it sets up the story completely in terms of the relationship between Faye and the future relationship between Faye and Jack. Did you have that all in mind at the beginning, or was it a process of writing until you knew who Jack was and who Faye was?
I think I had a general idea already from the start of their relationship, and I've seen relationships like this around me over and over again, unfortunately. And I mean, for me, it was a big challenge to include sex scenes. I have always avoided them like the plague, because I envision my mother reading my books and I'm absolutely mortified at the thought. But for these books, it was necessary, because in the books, sex is about power, which it is also in real life. It has got so much to do about power. And the way you have sex is something that in a relationship really shows the power play between the couple, and it reflects on their whole life together. So it was absolutely necessary to have sex as a part. And what I think was, I have one reader here in Sweden who gave a very interesting comment after reading the first book, The Gilded Cage, because she wrote to me on direct message on Instagram, and she said that, well, first, I really, really disliked Faye. I really didn't like her, and I didn't get it at all. And then I started thinking, well, what if she had been a male character? And the reader said, then I realized that I read books and see movies like that every day, and I don't even react to it. It's just normal. So the thing with Faye is that I've allowed her to act like a man. She has given herself the right to behave like a man and the power men have in society. And there is something deeply provocative about a woman doing that.
Look, it's an extraordinary book because the undercurrents, the political undercurrents, are really quite phenomenal. I don't know whether you've come across a book that was recently published in Australia called See What You Made Me Do by Jess Hill, which won the Stella Prize. And it's about domestic violence, and it's about the insidious forms of domestic violence, which this book actually, your book, sets up. I mean, he doesn't hit her, but he constantly undermines her. He constantly puts her down. And you obviously are exploring this and highlighting this in the first part of the book.
Yes, I mean, the everyday abuse, often when we talk abuse, we talk about the big cases, the women who get killed by their spouses, or the women who get beaten really bad. But it's even more common with the everyday abuse that Faye goes through. So many women that are put down, undermined, they lose their self-confidence, and that's the way they are confined and trapped in a relationship, by taking away their belief in their self. They don't think they're worth better. And that's why I also call it a gilded cage, because you're trapped. You're trapped. You don't think you deserve to go anywhere. You don't think you deserve to be with anyone better. You think this is the way it's supposed to be. And that is so much more common than we would like to think.
There's actually almost a kind of fable, fairy tale element to this book, in that, you know, she's the princess in the gilded cage. I mean, you actually also describe a very wealthy Stockholm society. I mean, we might think that, you know, Swedish society is very egalitarian, but actually you're pointing out that there's great wealth and great inequality, right?
Oh yes, we have all the classes that, you know, the rest of the world have as well. And we have this upper class in Sweden as well. I sometimes get invited to it as a guest. So I do, and I do have friends who are in it, because you have to be in it by birth. That's one of the things that I'm very fascinated by this world. So that's one of the reasons I put it in the book. I'm very, very fascinated by it, because there are so many rules, and we have the whole thing with new money and old money. It's so much better with old money. And I mean, they have these ways of telling if you belong or not. Like if you go to an upper class home here in Sweden, you don't take off your shoes. And for me, that is so weird. The first thing I do when I enter someone's home is take off my shoes, but that's a giveaway immediately. They can tell I'm not one of them. They can tell that from a lot of other clues as well, but that's one of them.
You see, this is one of the reasons why I love crime fiction, because it's those sorts of details, you know, about another culture that you don't get now. You have to put that in the next book.
It might be in there, actually. I think it might be, yeah.
Yeah, because it's those nuances that you only get in literature, and you've got this combination with crime fiction of the the crime itself and the genre itself, which we understand across cultures, and then these nuances, these subtle nuances of what people are doing and how they do it, and in very particular ways. But in terms of this fairy story that you've written, this fable, the princess rescues herself in the end.
Yes, that's the beauty of it. She does not need the prince.
No, but the prince is, forget him.
Yeah.
He doesn't exist. And there's this glorious kind of, I've always loved fiction and stories where there's a transformation scene. And here I'm going to do, a couple of film references. Pretty Woman, when she finally gets to be able to shop with the credit card.
That's my favorite movie scene, actually. You work on commission, right? Too bad. I love that. I quote it very often.
Yes.
Yes.
And you do this about halfway through the book. Suddenly she is transformed. Yeah. But now this is where your economics and business knowledge comes in, right? And because I was going, oh, wow, this is clever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a background as an economist, and I worked as a marketer, and I've always considered myself both an author and a businesswoman, because as an author, you run your own business. And for me, it's always been natural to talk about marketing. 15 years ago, when I was, or more, 17, when I was first published, it was a dirty word to talk about marketing connected to literature. Yeah. It's gotten better, and I've kept talking about it because I don't see the conflict. When I write my books, I do not care what the readers want. Sorry, readers. I do not care what the audience, what the market wants. I don't care what's in fashion. I do not care. I write very selfishly my books only for one reader, and that's myself. But once the book is published, of course, I want as many people as possible to read it. Mm. I think that any author that says differently lies. That's my personal belief.
So you actually, I think, have talked about branding, and I think you see yourself as a brand.
Yes. Yeah, when I first became a writer, I realized one thing, since I had the experience within marketing, that you don't go in and ask for a man without a dog. You go in and ask for Håkan Nesser's latest book. Mm. So I realized quickly that as an author, if I wanted to reach a wide audience, which I wanted to, I had to become a brand. So I decided to say yes to every PR opportunity that opened up for me, which at that time was like one every third month. So I did the gardening magazines, I did the car magazines, I did everything. So that was a very clear strategy on my point, and I've always been very, very open about that. I'm not ashamed at all for that.
No, and you shouldn't be. But I want to talk to you about the fact that you also did Dancing with the Stars.
I did. In 2012, I did the Swedish version of Dancing with the Stars. So I've also showed my butt on TV. So yesterday they showed a game show on the reprise of a game show I was in a couple of years ago, where I go into a snake pit and have to look for clues by lifting snakes. So that's one of the, a few of the wonderful things you get to do as an author as well, if you find a wide audience.
But I understand
that with the stars was much more fun than the snakes, I have to say.
Yes, because I think you carried on with the dancing, didn't you?
I got so bitten by dancing, so I kept competing actually in Latin dance. So I did it's called Pro-Am competitions. I did 2 Pro-Am competitions, one in New York and one in Boston. Yeah. And that was, amazing. The whole ballroom world is absolutely amazing. It's so filled with bronzing and sequins and big hairs and tons of makeup and feathers, and I just loved it.
Well, of course, there's that great Australian film, Strictly Ballroom.
I love that. I love that movie.
Which captures that environment so poetically, and also so in an over-the-top sort of way. But do you have any problems with the way in which people see you from Dancing on the Stars to being an author? Is there any disjuncture there, or does it just carry over seamlessly?
I think I've been, I've had quite a strange career. I became a household name quite early on, and then by fate and the way that the directions my life took, I became also gossip material because I divorced for the first time. I'm married for the third time. I divorced for the first time in 2006, and that was, few small headlines, but still wasn't that much gossip magazines. But then I married a guy who was a celebrity in Sweden as well. He's the winner of the world's first Survivor show, because Sweden was the first country to do Survivor. And that became, 1+1 was 3, and suddenly my life was in the gossip magazines. So they have stayed there. But I mean, Swedish gossip magazines is quite nice. It's not like compared to the UK. I don't know what it's like in Australia, but it's far from the UK or US magazines.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with it. I also find that it gives me opportunities to experience a lot of fun things. I mean, Dancing with the Stars, I wouldn't have been able to do that otherwise. And also I get to meet a lot of fantastic people. So I don't mind, really. It doesn't bother me in any way.
No, and I mean, I read somewhere that at one point the sales of your books, I think it's about, the population of Sweden's what, about 9.5 million?
Yeah.
And that your book sales were, in Sweden were something like 4.5, which meant that every second person in Sweden had read one of your books.
Yeah. It's something like that.
Which is an extraordinary kind of figure. I mean, I think we probably have quite a problem imagining how successful an author might be in that regard. But I know that that's also enabled you to go to different crime conferences and meet other authors. And I'd like you to talk about, I mean, you said that you write for yourself, but who have been the authors that have influenced you or that have impressed you? I mean, if you had to say, what would you wish you had written, or who do you wish you'd written like? Who would that be?
I know exactly. And I also want to say that for me, I've loved books my entire life. And for me, growing up, authors were gods. So I am extremely always very, very starstruck when I get to meet and sometimes even call a friend some of the world's crime writers that I've admired and read growing up. I'm still very, very starstruck by that. But someone I haven't met, but she has written a book that I would kill to have written that book. It's Donna Tartt's The Secret History. I mean, I love it, love it, love it. It's so brilliant. Also Gillian Flynn. What's it called? Gone Girl. I thought that was so brilliant. Michael Connolly, him I've met. He's a very, very nice, quiet man. Doesn't talk much, but very, very nice. I've met him both at a crime festival and at the set of Bosch, actually, because it's a friend of mine who directs Bosch, the TV series. And The Poet was one of my first, real big, that I fell in love with.
Yes. Yeah, and
my first love with Agatha Christie, I just need to say that was my very, very, very first true love within true crime, within crime fiction.
And you were quite young when you started reading them, weren't you?
I was a very precocious child, and I started reading at a very early age. And I think I was about 7 when I read my first Agatha Christie, because my father had lots of them in his bookshelf. My father was an avid book reader, and he had a huge bookshelf. And I found Death on the Nile as the first Agatha Christie book, and I loved that. However, Miss Marple and Saint Mary Mead, that's my favorite, within Blues.
Microcosmic world in which you can reflect everything, which is I think what you do with the Fjällbacka series.
Yeah. I'm very influenced by that.
Yes, but I also read somewhere, and I think those of us who love books are also children who love to write. And my first novel, I think, was about a Scottish cat living in a castle with secret passages. I understand your first excursion into writing was killing Santa or something.
Yeah, I was 4. I couldn't write, so I drew pictures and I made my father write the text I quoted for him. And it's 4 pages long. It's called Santa. And on the first page, there's a picture of, I've drawn Santa and his wife. They're holding hands, they're smiling. She's got a bouquet of flower. The sun is shining. Everything is dandy. You should always start a crime story with everything looking perfect. And then 4 pages later, things have gone straight downhill. Santa's wife is lying on the ground, beaten to death, and blood is running from her Santa hat. So I usually say that there were 2 options for me in life, either to become a crime writer or a serial killer. So those were my 2 options.
Okay, but I also understand, and you actually have, I think on your website, you've actually got a set of instructions for would-be crime writers. Yeah, I was doing doing my appropriate research, and your website's fantastic. But one of the things you say is motivation. So what was Santa's motivation for killing Mrs. Santa?
Well, I was so amateurish by then, so I just left out the motive. I've learned since then, so I'm not quite sure. Some anger issues, I think, or she didn't get the toys ready in time.
That's
he was probably an early Jack.
Yeah, because I can see that you're setting yourself up for a kind of domestic noir scenario. Yeah. Right.
I think that might have been the birth of Jack.
Indeed, indeed. Well, look, we're going to invite people to send in their questions from now, and but I would also like to ask you. I presume, given that you've done that advice to authors on your website, that you get a lot of people asking you, how do you get started? How do you emerge as a crime writer? And there you were, the businesswoman who did the creative writing class. But obviously there was a huge desire to write underpinning all of that.
Yeah.
What's your advice to people now?
Well, I have a few advice that I give, I like a combination, because there are several factors that have to be there. Firstly, read a lot, because the best school to learn how to write is to read a lot. If you don't read a lot, you can't become a writer. I mean, I would say that as a definite fact. Also, creative writing courses, they're fabulous. There are also a lot of good books out there about writing, because yes, you can learn how to write. Some people say that, oh, it's something you have or you don't have it, you can't learn it. Of course you can. It's like painting. The painters go to painter schools. I mean, they learn how to draw. You have to have some amount of talent, of course, but you can learn so much from other people's lessons and mistakes. And also, I had this idea before I started writing that you had to have the whole book finished in your head. I have maybe 2% of the book. I just sit down. You have to be very good at sitting down many hours per day. And then I start, and then I just follow the story. And it can sometimes feel like such a huge task to write a book. And it does take a lot of time. But one advice I often give to kind of, deconstruct it a bit is to say that don't focus on this whole book you're going to write. Concentrate on writing 1 page per day. If you do that for a year, you have a quite big book.
Yeah. It's that incremental approach.
Yes.
Just it's the consistency of the effort, right?
I mean, how do you eat an elephant? Piece by piece.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, we've got some good questions coming in, Camilla.
You can ask anything you want, guys.
Yeah, I think you've said at one occasion that you have no filter, so away we go.
Absolutely no filter, so ask away.
But the first one is from Ona, who says, have you ever been tempted to write a screenplay of one of your novels?
Not on one of my novels, but I'm actually writing a screenplay right now, and I'm going into, we're starting shooting it on Monday, actually, because I started a movie production company this year, Bad Flamingo Films, and I'm working on several scripts for that production company as we speak.
That's interesting. And are these imagined as television series or films, or what scope are you going for?
We're going to do both TV series and films. The film we're starting to shoot on Monday is a film about, it's a love story actually, 2 people that are in lockdown in a hotel during a pandemic that is much worse than Corona. So the world is dying, and they are in lockdown there and fall in love. So that's more of a love story. But in October now, it's actually going to start running on Swedish Television, a series, TV series that I've made and I've worked on for the last 4 years. And it's a soap opera, because they've been gone from Sweden for like 15 years and I've missed them. So eventually I decided I'm going to have to write one so we can see a soap opera again on TV. So it's going to have all the love and hate and greed and lust and betrayal, all of the good stuff.
And so I think, there's a Dallas theme coming back here.
I just love it. I just love it. Revenge is my favorite theme, actually.
Okay, Sue Green asks, novels often idealize parenting, but yours show it warts and all. And she says, is this a deliberate strategy based on your life?
I mean, I just described it as I see it. And my first child, my son, who's now 18, was born the same week that my first book, The Isprinsessan, was accepted for publishing. So being a mother and being an author has gone hand in hand for me. And with him, I had always wanted to become a mother, but it was not like I expected. I got postnatal depression, and I have 4 children, and I'm very, very open in interviews and with speaking with friends and everything, that I absolutely hate the first year. I love the child, but I hate the baby first. I mean, the first year. It's not for me. And I think that's something that we should be able to speak more openly about, because women don't, because they're ashamed and they think there's something wrong with them. But so that's been a topic that has been reoccurring in my books, that motherhood isn't this peachy, pink, fluffy, romantic thing that we sometimes create. It's hard. It's really, really hard. I've got 4 of them. It's hard.
Yeah. Did you have twins? I mean, I know that Erica has twins at one point.
No, I was dreading for every ultrasound when I was pregnant. I was dreading. Please don't let it be twins. Please don't let it be twins. So no, I have 4 children with 3 dads to make my summer planning a bit complicated.
It would.
But we're all good pals, so it works out fine.
There's a question here from Hong Nguyen, who says, could you let us know where you got Erica and Patrick's names from? I mean, that's interesting.
Yes. Erica is actually named after my best childhood friend.
Yes.
We're still friends, but she was my best friend when we were young. And the last name, Falk, is a family name on my grandmother's side. And Patrick, I just wanted him to have like, that was more like, I wanted him to have like a really, really average Joe Swedish name. It's one of the most, for that generation, he's about my age. I think I had like 3 Patricks in my class. It's a very, very common. They were Patrick, Martin, Anders, Johan. So I just picked a very, very common name because I wanted him to be the guy next door. He's just, decent, nice guy next door.
Actually, you've just reminded me, there's a lovely little section in the Gilded Cage where you talk about these affluent families naming their children and choosing names which, and again, this is a cultural context thing because we don't quite understand what those names are, but can you say what the fashion is that you're trying to describe? It's to go back to archaic names, is that right?
Pardon, to go back to our
archaic, old, kind of.
Yes, you mean with upper class names, or I'm not quite sure I get the context. Yeah, no, it's names are such an, I always give a lot of attention to the names I've given characters in my book, because names bear so much meaning, and the names we choose say so much about both who we are or who we want to be. Yeah. So in the upper class names in Sweden, for example, it's often inherited names. It's names from your grandfather. It's Oscar, it's Albert. It's always spelled with a Victor, never spelled with a K, always with a C. and the girls' name are like Jacqueline and a lot of French influence. So it's of utmost important with the names. They don't take it lightly.
No, no, no. I'm just fascinating about that because that's another one of those little cultural insights. So,
Yeah.
so names are very significant. When I was expecting my son, my husband, who's American, Norwegian American, kept suggesting names like Torvald and Ragnar. And I was going, no, no. But now, Tor wouldn't have been so bad.
No, I mean, it's coming back. It's coming back.
We've got another lovely question from Megan, and who says, what is your daily writing routine? Readers love to know how writers do it. They want to imagine your life.
I know. I was the same way before I started writing. So, and you would ask even the most detailed questions, like how do you sit? What type do you for the word you use? And I get the kids off to school first in the morning, and then I procrastinate for about an hour, drink my coffee and make up things that I have to do, and like start circling around the computer like a white shark. And then I sit down and I write for a couple of hours, and then I take a lunch break. Usually I watch something like Dr. Phil or something, just to like a palate cleanser. And then I write for a couple more hours. And when the kids get home from school, my writing day is over. So I very much have office hours, and I write either mostly at home, and I always have to have the TV on. My colleagues think that I'm very weird. I can't write if it's too quiet. So either write at home with the TV on, or I to sit at a cafe or restaurant with lots of noise around me. So I do that too a lot.
I love that because that's very human. It sounds, it's about as undisciplined as I am.
I'm not very disciplined, so that's one of my challenges. I really have to force myself, but I work with a reward system. I have an idea of how many pages per day I need to write.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't let myself, for example, watch an hour of Dr. Phil on lunch if I haven't fulfilled the pages I had set up to write, usually like 3 pages or something. Then I reward myself with an hour of Dr. Phil. So I work very, very much with a reward system.
So Dr. Phil, not Oprah?
But Oprah's not showing anymore.
Right.
She's not doing the Oprah show anymore. And I've watched all those episodes, but they're not making new ones.
They're not watching. I was wondering whether Oprah was still being run in Sweden or not, but they're not. Long gone. Okay. All right. Nice question from Elizabeth. With Faye being a woman who takes no prisoners, who has the biggest influence on her characterization and development?
I actually think that my oldest daughter, not that she's the model for. Sorry, I just got something in my throat.
Yeah.
So it's not corona. It's just something in my throat. You always have to say that when you cough or sneeze or something now.
You do. It's more acceptable to fart, in fact.
Yes, exactly. But when she's 16 now, and when she started becoming a teenager, that's the time in my life that I open up my eyes much, much more to the power balance between men and women and the inequalities in society. And I realized that my daughter won't have the same opportunities in life as my sons. They get a lot for free just for having a penis, which is absurd. They will have higher salaries than her in average just because they have a penis. It's bizarre. And I started getting angry about it. And I think that's a lot of that anger and a lot of those thoughts that have gone into creating Faye. Because I think women need to get angry more. Women are supposed to be, in our nature, where society wants us to be kind, giving, forgiving, nurturing, loving. That's qualities that a woman is supposed to be attributed with. That's words we use positively about women. We're supposed to turn the other cheek and take care of everybody. And we need to stop doing that. So for me, this power struggle, it's not about telling men to, you need to start behaving. I mean, that's one part of it. That's a big part of it. And we've had the whole Me Too movement here as well. But we also need to own our situation, because with Faye, I mean, she gave up voluntarily her power. He didn't force her. She gave it up voluntarily. And we need to stop doing that. We need to take responsibility for our own lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've got another nice question here from Anne Collier, who says, COVID has led me to this Zoom on crime writing. And she says, which book should I start with? Any suggestions? After the discussion, I moved to read The Gilded Cage. Well, I think she's asking more generally about crime fiction in general. I mean, if she's going to be reading you, she has to start with The Isprinsessan.
Yes.
You could also read The Gilded Cage. But
then also I would like to recommend Michael Connolly, the poet. That's a very, very good place to start. It's an old classic, but it's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. And yeah, there's so many recommendations to make. I mean, if this person,
I'm not going to be able to end. I love recommending books to people.
Yeah, I know. I'm the same.
Lullaby by Leila Slimani.
Ah, okay, right. That's one. Yeah, that one. That was nominated for a Booker Prize at one point.
I think so. Yes, it's brilliant.
So it's one of those crossover books.
Yeah.
There's another theme in The Gilded Cage which we haven't talked about, which is female friendship, because there's an incredible friendship in there. And obviously that's something that you also see as terribly important in women's lives. Can you say a little bit about Chris, the character who's the friend?
I mean, Chris is the girlfriend we all want. She's cool, she's strong, she tells it like she is, and she's fiercely loyal. And for me, sisterhood has so much to do with, again, this power balance between men and women, because men are so much better at helping each other than women are. We are sometimes our worst enemies. I sometimes use the example, if there's a boardroom with 10 seats and there's one woman and 9 men in that board, the women in the company will compete with the woman for her seat. They won't see it as they're competing for one of the 10 seats. They will compete with the woman. And that's something that holds us back and hinders us. We compete with each other. We gossip about each other. We put up obstacles for each other instead of helping each other. And that's sad. I think that's really sad.
Well, there's a lovely question from Zoe here, which might go to that precisely. She says, I'm sitting bouncing a baby up and down who refuses to sleep, still in that.
I got the t-shirt.
How did you manage to write when your children were babies, she asks.
Well, I actually am so thankful we have this baby guru in Sweden. I mean, every country has their baby whisperer that writes books and methods. And I followed her method. It's probably very similar to a lot of, you probably have Australian methods with a schedule and training them to sleep in their own bed, etc., etc. And that has saved both my life and my writing career. My children have slept like, knocked out, all 4 of them, thanks to that. They've slept through the night after 4 months. I've had them on a schedule, so I've known when they're going to sleep, and then I've written. So it's thanks to that.
Well, I'm so in admiration of people who can write at night. I can't. I fall.
I can't either. I can't either. I'm too tired.
Staying with children, and this might be getting close to our last question. We're asked, some authors are also writing for children. Actually, Joe Nesbo has written a children's series, which includes Fart in the title, just to continue my theme. Have you thought of including younger readers in your work?
Well, I'm actually, yesterday, I just got the freshly printed copy of my 10th book in the Super Charlie series. It's children's book series. My son is named Charlie, so I based it on him. And he's a super Charlie baby. And I have the whole family in there. And so I just got the 10th book from the printer. It's called Super Charlie and the Poo Explosion. And and it's actually going to become a cinema movie they've just started work on it now, so it will premiere in 2 years.
I can only begin to imagine what this contains.
And my son, he's 11. He's very proud of being Super Charlie.
Okay, Camilla, I think we're going to be winding up in just a moment or two. Is there anything that we haven't covered in our conversation that you would like to add or say to your Australian readership or wherever people are that are watching this tonight?
Well, I just want you to, in these difficult times, I find it so fantastic that books have become such a comfort for many people. And I also want to say that I have my sister and my niece in Australia. So I have family in Australia, and I always love visiting your country. So I hope to be back sometime in the future when the world has changed back to a little bit more normal.
Yes, because you were in Australia for the Sydney Writers' Festival at one point, or did I get that wrong?
That's true. And I had so much fun. And my publishing house, HarperCollins, had wonderful women there. So they took me night clubbing in Sydney the last night before I left. So I went straight from the nightclub to the airplane. I've never done that before. Thank you, HarperCollins. You were absolutely fantastic. We had a blast.
A great Sydney experience. Well, you have to come back.
Great Sydney experience, yes.
So thank you so much, Camilla. I'm going to hand back to Catherine so she can tell people how to get hold of your books. But it's been just such a joy talking to you, and I hope you have a lovely day and good luck.
I love your glasses. Fantastic. You look fabulous.
Thank you so much. Catherine, back to you.
Thank you so much, both Sue and Camilla. I have to say, that's one of the best, that's one of the most fun interviews I've listened to for a long time. That no filter is a really good thing. The idea that farting is now more socially acceptable than coughing or sneezing, I'm going to enjoy that.
It's so true.
Yeah, absolutely, it really is. And I did hear about your night clubbing, actually, when I talked to HarperCollins. They said she knows how to have a good time.
So they do too. So I wasn't the only one having fun.
they took their share of responsibility.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I think Sue, well, when you come back, Camilla, Sue and I and a whole load of HarperCollins girls, we should all go out and have a really good time.
Please join us next time.
That would be so good. For anyone who hasn't yet read The Gilded Cage, go to online bookseller Dimmock's, key in Bad Sydney Dimmock's, and you will find the book there just waiting for you. I found, as I said, I loved the ending of this book, and I'm even more happy now to know there'll be another one. I hope you won't abandon Patrick and Erica, because I really love them too.
I'm just starting to write the next one, actually.
Oh, good.
Yes.
So look, we all have a lot to look forward to. And that will be it for today. Our next event is tomorrow morning at 10. And this time we're off to the US. We're going to be hearing from Don Winslow, that star writer. And if you don't yet have your ticket, it's not too late. Go to the Bad Sydney website and grab one. But for the time being, let us just thank Sue and Camilla for the most wonderful hour, and just looking forward to seeing you in Sydney. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
It was fantastic. Goodbye, and
Bye.
see you again. We very much hope.
Absolutely. Bye.